I was absolutely strapped for cash. I mean, what more can I say? I had just gotten kicked out of my mother's house. Granted, I was 25 with no job. I was desperate for cash. I didn't want to be that guy working minimum wage jobs for the rest of his life. I didn't want to make enough to barely support myself. What was I to do? In hindsight, I probably should have just started there and worked my way up. Like, a normal fucking person. Well, I decided I'd do some freelancing. It paid pretty good and I could pick my own jobs. I felt pretty confident that I could make enough to start getting an actual education other than a high school diploma. What better place to look than on Craigslist, right? No, wrong. I did it anyways though. One night while scrolling through the job section of Craigslist, I stumbled upon an ad for help tending a farm. It provided living quarters, free meals, and the best part, money. The ad was written by a man who said he had inherited a farm, but he was getting too old to tend the animals and crops as efficiently as he once used to. The pay was extremely good, and I had a place to stay basically rent-free. After about 2 hours of deliberation, I decided to go ahead and send him an email. I explained I only needed this temporarily, as I was saving money for school. I told him I could be a reliable worker, but only for 6 months. I didn't really expect an answer back, as he probably wanted something longer or more permanent. It only took about 15 minutes before I received a response. I sent the email at 2 a.m. I admit, I was a little off-put by the speedy reply, especially since it was the middle of the night. I figured he'd be sleeping. Anyways, the email he sent was pretty short and to the point. He explained any help was good enough, and said he'd be ready for my arrival the following day. He left the address and his phone number. The next morning, I packed everything I wanted to take, told my mother I was leaving for her job and I'd stay in contact, and headed out to the farm. When I arrived, he was nothing like I had imagined. He was tall and fairly overweight. He had a beard that wasn't quite full, but still enough to be called a beard, I guess. His eyes were dark, really dark. I could barely make out his pupils. Upon approaching him with my bags, he reached out to me. I dropped my bags and shook his hand. It felt forced. It wasn't a very friendly handshake. It was firm, almost gripping. He let go, and I felt my arm fall to my side. He asked me to hurry in, so I did. He quickly showed me to my room and asked if I could start right away. Flustered, I dropped my belongings in my room and threw my phone and keys on the bed. I quickly changed my pants into jeans and put on some old shoes. I walked out to the main hall. He stood there, almost mannequin-like. When we locked eyes, he started telling me my tasks. I was to tend the field 3 times a day. He said he had plowed over the land to start anew. He was planting corn, and a lot of it. He claimed he was going to sell and distribute the corn to local grocery stores. I asked about the animals, and he said there were none. Before I could ask any further, he cut me off and threw me a shovel. He asked me to fill in holes throughout the farm before he could till the land. I took the shovel and hurried out the door. Staring at him was uncomfortable. I was tired. I had barely slept the night before. Hell, I had sent the email the night before. This all felt like a whirlwind, but all I thought about was the money. I knew in my gut this wasn't right, but I really needed this. The farm was huge. At the end of the field, you couldn't even see the house anymore. I know because I had to walk through the whole way to fill in holes. Holes I never found, by the way, until the edge of the farm. It was surrounded in thick forest. I knew it was a rural area, but I didn't really realize the farm was basically a one-way in, one-way out kind of deal. The forest was dense, really dense. You'd get lost in a matter of seconds if you weren't paying attention. When I reached the very end of the farm, I noticed only one hole, and about 14 other already filled in holes. Why would he send me out here, over a mile away, to fill in one hole? I felt uneasy about the whole thing. As I started to fill in the hole, which is about 10 feet deep, I couldn't stop glancing over at the already filled disturbed ground. After I filled in about 2 feet worth of dirt, my curiosity got the best of me. I decided to dig into one of the already filled holes. These were not small holes. They were wide and about 12 feet in length. They were big enough to fit a deceased cow. Hell, maybe even 2. I had already figured that's what the case was, considering there weren't any animals. I'm glad I went with my gut. It didn't take much digging to reach the first, well, weird object. It was a wallet. I picked it up and opened it, but it was completely empty. I tossed it to the side and kept digging. That's when I saw a hint of red fabric. I couldn't tell right away what it was. It could have been an animal wrapped in a blanket. It's safe to say I was heading into denial. It was only about 4 feet down when I discovered the body. Her body was in bad shape, but she wasn't decomposing. All of the trauma she went through was clear on her skin. I knelt down and felt her body. She was cold. I sat there for a couple minutes, just staring at her. Once I realized that her death had to be within the last 48 hours, I ran to the nearest tree and vomited. I didn't even bother filling in the hole I was supposed to, but I reburied the girl. Her body didn't deserve to be exposed like that. I threw the wallet into an entrance of the woods near the graves. I figured the police would find it, even if he were to try to hide the bodies better. After that, I ran. I felt like an Olympic athlete. It was starting to get dark, and I had to make it back before then, or I'd be wandering around this field for hours. The last thing I wanted was to be hunted down like an animal in pitch black. I knew that's what he was going to do. He knew filling the holes would have taken until dark. Once I reached the house, I finally stopped to catch my breath. I knew I had to remain composed, or he would know. I regulated my breath and walked in. He was sitting at the dining table to the left of the house. I couldn't tell what he was doing, but once he heard me open the front door, his head swung around so fast I thought he'd snap his neck. He looked at me like a deer in the headlights. It was obvious he hadn't expected me back so soon. "You're done?" I could tell he was trying everything in his power to remain calm. "I got sick. I had to come back. I'll go back out and finish it. I have to use the bathroom." I tried to sound as nonchalant as I could, but I knew he could tell I was lying. After looking at me up and down, he said, "Okay then, get back to it. I want it done by tonight." I shook my head and hurried to my room. I took the clothes I had taken off when I arrived and shoved them into my suitcase. I was so happy I had it unpacked. I grabbed my phone, but my keys were gone. Frantic, I started looking for them as quietly as possible. He took them. I knew it. My original plan was run in, grab my things, and book it the hell out of there, which is pretty hard to do with no keys. I sat on the bed for a moment. My phone had no signal, and I felt a sense of dread wash over me. I started going through my pictures. If I was going to die, I wanted to see my friends and family one more time. Even if it was just over a phone screen, it felt like enough. That's when I stumbled upon my 23rd birthday party, when my mother had gifted me my car as a present. I stood proudly by my car, with a set of keys in each hand. I had 2 sets of keys. I don't know why it didn't dawn on me earlier. I never used them, but I always carried them in case I locked myself out of my car. I unzipped my suitcase and pulled everything out of it. At the very bottom was my second set of keys. They must have been the first thing I threw in while packing. It was a mindless habit at that point, and in that moment, I couldn't have been more proud of myself. I decided to say screw the clothes and grabbed my phone and the keys. I peeked out of the bedroom and walked to the bathroom. It wasn't hard to act ill because I was already nauseated from sheer terror and anxiety. I tried to make over-exaggerated gagging sounds, but I eventually threw up. It wasn't my intention, but it made it more realistic. I rinsed out my mouth and stuck my phone and keys into the side of my pants. I made sure they weren't obvious and headed back out the main area. Still sitting at the dining table, I told him I was ready to finish the work. He nodded, and I walked out. I started walking toward the farm again, because when I looked behind me, he was watching me through the window. I walked slow, and once he wasn't watching me anymore, I fled to my car. He heard my frantic running and bolted outside. By then, I was already in my car and pulling out. He started to sprint full speed at my car, and I floored it. I heard 2 gunshots ring out, and I felt a slight impact as one of the bullets shot through the passenger seat. I sped until I felt safe. It had taken me 4 hours to get there, and about 2 to get home. I immediately went to my mother's and told her everything. Turns out, there were 52 bodies discovered on the farmland when I reported what had happened to the authorities. They conducted a thorough search of the whole farm. Many missing persons cases that went cold throughout the years were coming to light. The only thing they didn't find was him. I look every few months to see if they finally have a lead, but they never do. The name he had given me was fake, and the phone number was that of a burner phone. I didn't have any pictures of him. I described him to a sketch artist, although I saw online that there's a farm on the West Coast. Pays well, living expenses taken care of, and free meals. It's run by an old man who says the work is just too much to handle by himself. It seems too good to be true. The similarities are eerie. I know you might need the money, but I wouldn't go if I were you. Shout out to my superfans, Sweet Black Swan, Tacey, and Brooklyn. I really appreciate you guys supporting my channel, and I really look forward to making more content for everyone.